Welcome to Expedition Networking, a special segment of the Networking RX podcast. I'm Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections, and your host for this program. For those of you who are familiar, on the Networking RX podcast, we share information and have conversations with experts, such as authors, researchers, and social scientists. And all of these programs are aimed at helping you learn how to become better at building professional relationships and understanding why they work. In this Expedition Networking segment, however, we're going to bring on successful entrepreneurs and unique professionals and explore their networking adventure and learn how they used relationships to create lasting success. Today on Expedition Networking, we have Daniel Giordano. He started out creating beautiful homes for the affluent for 20 years. Then he had a defining moment. His first child was born, and he decided he needed to figure out how to be the father and husband that was going to be home with his family, as opposed to building homes for other families. And so Dan helps people worldwide on how to transform their businesses and impact more lives through the power of the internet. So he is actually influencing influencers and inspiring world changers to get off the sidelines and live the life all in, as he puts it. So Dan, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Frank. I'm glad to be here.
So you're down in Florida, you're down in Southeast Florida, this all started up in the Carolinas, right? I mean, it was all part of one. Was it Carolinas or
Philadelphia?
Philadelphia,
a little further north.
Okay. I knew it was East Coast. But this all kind of happened at the same time then that you decided, hey, I'm done building these homes and I need to have a different life, and let's pack the bag. We don't need to be here anymore, more or less, right?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, being exposed to, a new opportunity or a new, venture or anything. When I remember the day I got out of the car when I came to visit Florida, when there was, a couple feet of snow on the ground up in Philadelphia, and looked around and I was like, when this exists, like, why on God's green earth would I live anywhere else, right? If now that I know this is here, I have to figure out how I get here, right? And it wasn't overnight. It took me about 3 years to sell the company. I had to fulfill some contracts that I had that personally needed me. And then eventually was able to transition out in 1998. We, headed down here. There was a little detour. We did wind up going over to the Philippines for 7 months to kind of hang out and build a separate business, but that was a fun time. Got to experience that, and then came back to Florida and haven't looked back. So it's been 22 years now.
Now, building homes and helping people build out their lives or just their influence on the internet, certainly different businesses. I guess what did you learn in that transition?
Here's the interesting thing for me is when I moved to Florida, I had no intention of getting back into the industry, in the construction industry. I was clearly going to do something else and wasn't sure what that was, but this all comes down to connections, right? At the end of the day, it's who you know and who you meet. And I was in Florida not even a week, and I met a decorator at a party I was invited to, and he had asked me a question. He said, can you hang this exquisite silk wall covering? And I'm always up for a challenge. I did have some wallpaper background. I said, yeah, sure, I could do that. And he's like, it's really a high-end job, so price it accordingly. And I figured he would say no after I gave him the price and we'd be good to go, right? And of course, he said yes. And next thing I know, I'm working in these multi-million dollar homes, $1 million homes along the beach here in Palm Beach. And I'm like, hiring people again. I'm building a company again. Now I'm out of the house, right? And what I noticed though is it all came down to this, ability to connect with people and just do what you say you're going to do, right? And because of that, I was able to, get off the ground running quickly, like literally, without even having an intention. Like a lot of times I talk about, you have to have a clear intention. I had no intention of getting back into that industry. Again, I just fell into it, kind of like what I fell into when I transitioned into the internet space.
Now, I guess let's go back to Philadelphia. When you started that business, at what point did you really realize that, hey, it's, this is how I envisioned it played out. You wanted to get into home building, but somewhere along the way, you realized you had to be networked. When did that all happen?
as I was building that company, and I got into the Victorian restoration side of things and historic restoration, I had realized that I was invited to there was a group up there called Deborah Heart and Lung that would do a special home that they would do every year in the area. They would take a home and then sponsor it, and then people would donate money, and a lot of the contractors would come in and do work. What I realized there when I committed to do that, I was like, there was this beautiful home, and this was a lesson for me, right? It was this beautiful home that I looked at, and I was like, wow, one day I'm going to restore that home, right? Instead of saying one day I'm going to own that home, right? It's
Right.
like, it's just a different mindset, right? Or a different question, right? Different statement. But what I realized is the connections in that group, right? And the amount of business that I got just from that, right? Just by putting my stake in the ground and saying, I'm going to donate to this cause, right? And I'll eat some of that cost, and it's going to, give me great exposure. And it just gave me, it literally put me on the map to become the best, company at what we did in that area at the time.
Gotcha. Now, when you started getting to the internet space, when you're down in Southeast Florida, you're obviously you almost couldn't get away from the construction business, the home remodeling business. What were the differences you found as far as networking and building relationships? I mean, there are a lot of commonalities, huge differences. What and where were they?
I think the main difference is here was the simple fact that I remember the one of the first big jobs that I showed up to. It was like a $12 million home on the beach. I show up for this estimate, and I'm from the Northeast. We're always on time or early, right? So I'm there 15 minutes early. Go up, knock on the door. Guy comes to the door. This is the owner of the home. He looks at me. He's like, "You're hired." And I looked at him. I'm like, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "I didn't even give you a quote yet." And he's like, "You're on time. You're not from here." Right.
Okay.
Right. And he said, "You actually showed up. That's two things good for you." He said, "You're hired." Right. Right. He's like, "I trust the quality. I came, I was referred by the decorator. So of course I had that credibility as well. But the difference in the mindset here, is because they have that, almost laid back, laid back. Some people do, not all, but, that laid back feeling like vacation, like, people just show up and it's that mañana type, attitude, like, I'll get to it tomorrow. And then people wonder why they have no work, right? Or they're not, not making enough money. They just don't show up for things, unfortunately. So for me, it was never, being A type, just driven, show up early, do what you say you're going to do. All those things, obviously contributed to the success of being able to, build fairly successfully again, in a totally different, in a totally different demographic area, from Florida to there, from Florida to Pennsylvania and New Jersey. It was just a lot different thing. Like I didn't have to sell myself. There was no real competition with what I did, because 99% of the battle was just really showing up. It's
Right.
yeah.
Now, when you got into the internet space, was it similar? Was it just showing up, or was there something similar to that, or what were the differences in creating relationships in this whole different space? This is the early 2000s, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Early 2000s, 1999, I started on the internet, dabbling in different things, trying to figure out some things. Because I asked myself one question. That question was, how can I be the dad that gets to be home with my kids? Because I grew up with a father that was never home, right? He was always working, old school, he's a great guy, love him. But, that was his way. And I knew I wanted to spend more time with my family. So I had to figure something out because I was busy. I was fortunate to have so much work. But what I hadn't gotten good at is taking myself out of the business, right? I had to be there to run things, to connect with clients. And it just wasn't, fulfilling for me. And I wanted to be home with my kids, knowing that my first daughter was on the way. And I started to question things. So, but what happened was, as far as the connections that I created, was the first industry I literally fell into was affiliate marketing. And it was in an industry I knew nothing about, right? It was in the poker industry, of all things. I'm not a gambler.
Right.
I didn't play Texas Hold'em. I never played. But I had figured something out, and it was, I basically figured a way to give away physical products to poker players, in exchange for them to go and take an action online. And I was able to get compensated for that from, some of the big poker rooms and poker affiliate programs that are out there at the time. And, when you talk about connections, it always reminds me of one night. I remember I was sitting there, again, I had no internet marketing skills. I barely knew how to do email, and check the internet, right? So, and there's hope for everybody, right? So,
Sure.
so, so I sat there one night and I had to watch poker because I had to start understanding, how to communicate with people, right? That are in that space. So I'm watching poker, which is not really it's kind of like watching paint dry. So I'm watching these guys play, and I said, man, I really wish somebody would come out with a training program, right? Now, this is dating us because, this is what I'm about to say. Some of you may not even know what it is that are listening, right? But I see the Secrets of Hold'em DVD infomercial come on, right? And I look at it and I'm like, wow. I was like, perfect. I want to buy them, right? Because I can give them away, right? As gifts to, all my subscribers. So I call the company up, I call the 800 number. I know it's a call center. And I said, listen, I need to speak to the person that's in charge of this immediately. It's an emergency. Right. Right. Within 10 minutes, I got a call back from the agent that ran this for the poker pro that was on the DVD, and built a relationship with him. Right. And when I had told him I want to buy them wholesale, he wouldn't sell them to me. He's like, you have to pay retail. I said, okay, can you do me a favor then? On your little box, on your little form, can you put a place for me to be able to put my name so the order's coming from me? And he goes, yeah, okay, we can do that. So after I ordered about 1,000 of them over the course of, the next month, he called me up and he's like, what the heck are you doing? He's like, nobody's moving that many things. What are you doing? And I said, well, I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing because then you can go copy me, right? I said, but
Yeah.
I said, but so long story short, he wound up, paying for a flight. It was my first time to Vegas, paid for my flight to Vegas, put me up in a suite. We sat and mapped out the first poker boot camp, right? For a little company that wound up being Full Tilt Poker, right?
Oh, wow.
All right. And here I am sitting in there with the top poker players in the world. I'm not really a poker player, right? I'm just a marketing guy that figured some things out, right? And I was able to connect with these people and just, I have this saying, like, you're not far from anybody. I've been saying this long before all the social media stuff. It's like you can get to anybody if you're clear on what you want, right? And I've always been able to get to the top of any marketplace, right, and get to the right people, right? Not even, probably not even aware of it sometimes, right? Just clear that, okay, this is the next logical step, right? And be able to connect and and it leads to great things.
Interesting. And so you affiliate marketing, when did it ever cross over? Was there ever a cross into your past life, going to contractors and saying, hey, there's this internet thing out here. I get your business. I understand what you're up to.
I'm a little slow when it comes to that. Like I sit there and think about it now. I was like, I joke with my wife. I said, I think I'm going to start another company, and just knowing what I know now, I know I'd crush it. Right. And I'm entertaining the idea of actually acquiring a company. But obviously I'm not going to run it and be driving all over from job site to job, doing all that stuff. Obviously I don't have people run it. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I've had that thought, but not much years later.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just interesting. I mean, I think we all kind of look back at our lives and say, I'm smarter today. I used to be an attorney, and I've been helping people become successful through professional relationships for the better part of 20 years. And I look back to my existence as an attorney and said, if I were to have what I have now to start over again, it would be night and day. I wouldn't struggle. I could figure it out. I guess that's just how life is. Growing up, what did you want to be?
That's a great question. Well, I was on the track to become a CPA and go through, college. But again, I asked myself a magical question in my third year of college that kind of changed the trajectory for me. And I had asked the tax accounting professor, how much could I make as a CPA? And back then it wasn't much. I don't know what it is today, but when he told me what it was, I said, I already make that part-time, working with my dad. Like, my dad had a painting contracting business, and, I always was working from the time I started working when I was like, I think 10 or 11. Right. So by the time I got to college, I was pretty much like, call it an expert in that space. Right. So, so I was like, I already make that much money. So what, I started asking myself, what am I really after here? Am I really the office type? Am I going to stay here and do that? Yes, I have an interest in it. And I'm kind of glad I decided to bow out, but there's a part of me that wishes that I went down that path. but then I look at some of the top guys we all know in the world that made similar choices, that went out and built amazing things, and it's not for everybody. So,
well, I tell people the two most important classes I ever had were typing. I was in high school. We had typing class, which isn't a big deal anymore because, like my kids grew up and they had a keyboard in their hands.
Right. Yeah.
But back in the day, that was a big deal. When I went off to college, I could type my own papers. I could, but the other one was accounting. And just to be able to, I just think everybody should have an understanding of, at a minimum, bookkeeping. I just think it touches everything. So I don't know that that wasn't time wasted in my mind.
Yeah, definitely not time wasted. And the accounting professor that I had in high school, he actually taught marketing. So that's where I learned about differentiation. And that's what actually catapulted me in the Victorian restoration business, because I totally differentiated myself down to the colors of my trucks, the way my guys dressed. I just knew that I had to do something different than just the guy with the rusty truck and the magnetic sign, right? And that's what made me stand out from everybody else. So I learned a lot there.
What do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? Martial arts.
Okay.
Boating. I love boating. Scuba diving, but I haven't been out in a while, right? It's just tough to get a buddy to go with you all the time, right? It is like at least a half day event. It's kind of like golf, it's like I like golfing for about the first couple holes, right? And then I get frustrated, right? And I'm like, this is a frustrating game. So things like that, spending time with the family and just watching shows, watching movies together, having a good time. And then when we can travel again, right?
Sure.
traveling around, seeing different sites.
Well, let's talk about your business and where it's at right now, and what would be a good opportunity. How could people get a hold of you? How people listening, how could they help you? How could you help them?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I have several businesses, but the core one is the agency side of what I'm doing. So that agency is designed to help people that are either influencers, people that are building a tribe, that want to build an online funnel that's lead generating and obviously leading to some type of call to action that they have for their product or service. Then we have an e-com division that's actually focusing on people that are either Amazon sellers or Amazon-based businesses, or regular e-com to a Shopify store or their own store. And then the third version of that is basically direct to small business, right? So small business needs advertising, lead generation, SEO, any of those types of services. That's core of that business. And then also from a coaching consulting perspective, really helping people gain clarity, because what I find is a lot of times when I speak to people, they're not really sure what they want, right? We all get stuck sometimes in the cycle of just grinding to do the work, right? And we kind of lose sight of like, what am I really after?
Right.
What do I want to accomplish this year? What do I want to accomplish? What's my 5-year plan and vision? And really mapping that out. So that's really where most things kick off, right? With one part of my business is really helping people identify like what are the things that are most important to them, right? And then we'll map out a plan to help them get there.
Now, with the Amazon, the seller, do you help people get that set up? I know there's a lot of moving parts with that.
Yeah. Mostly it's established businesses. It's not usually from the ground up. They're already established. They've gotten it to a certain level, but they're kind of plateaued, right? So we recently took one we actually in the past 3 months took one from 150,000 to 600,000 in 2 months, right? But we acquired that one, right? So that was a little different, but and then there's other people that have higher ones that some of the with my partners, they've taken it from 0 to 3, one of them 0 to 30 million, where they were kind of stagnant. They had the product, because a lot of people put all their money in the product development, right? Get the product ready to go, and then they have no idea how to get it out to market, and they try Facebook, they try Amazon, they try all these different platforms, and kind of struggle until they find the right team to support them.
What would be the best way of somebody getting a hold of you?
Best way would be you could either hit me up on LinkedIn or go directly to my website, danielgiordano.com.
And I'll get that in the show notes, so you don't need to spell that out for people. Right. And
Okay.
It'll be there. It'll be there. Trust me. You can spell it out, but somebody's driving, listening to this, they're not going to write it down. It's just easier. It's there in the show notes. Sure. I really appreciate your time on the program today. This was very insightful.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
To wrap things up, remember, we're looking for some enterprising business types to join our team as franchisees of AmSpirit Business Connections. Our franchisees work with entrepreneurs, sales representatives, and professionals in their area to help them become more successful through networking and the exchange of quality business referrals in a structured weekly morning meeting. This is a unique franchise opportunity, you see, because these meetings are in the morning. A successful business type or professional can add this franchise opportunity onto what they're already doing. Again, all of our franchisees do something else. For a couple hours in the morning, a few mornings a week, these franchisees work the AmSpirit Business Connections model. The rest of the time, they're attorneys, accountants, realtors, coaches, and consultants of various kinds. The wonderful thing is that not only do our franchisees realize a financial gain from operating the AmSpirit Business Connections model, but the business networks that they build and develop become a great source of referrals for their primary business as well. Perhaps you know someone, perhaps you are that someone. Whatever the case, to learn more about the AmSpirit Business Connections franchise opportunity, please contact me using the email in the show notes or the one we provide at the end of this program.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.